Nihanyang, hello! I'm the Dark Fae, and welcome back to Confessions of a First-Time Dungeon Master. We are here today with Session 12. If you missed Session 11, I'll put a link to it right here, but let's get into it. So, for Session 12, I did not do a whole lot of prep for this session, simply because I had planned out quite a bit of the swamp encounters before the previous session, Session 11, so I had kind of quite a bit sketched out, and just based off of our cadence, I had an idea kind of maybe how far they would get, especially since we were starting with combat. Combat takes quite some time, so story-wise they won't necessarily get as far as I figured that they would. So we started off with combat, and this combat that I prepped, it was a shambling mound with several little mud methods that I planned to come in kind of on their initiative that was hidden, because the players didn't know that the methods were there, since they can disguise themselves. So I learned quite a bit actually with this combat, with scaling, and since the CRs of creatures isn't really a very good indicator of how difficult it will be for the party, it kind of helped me to gauge a little bit, because this combat was not, when I first planned the encounter, I thought that it would be a little bit more difficult or interesting, just based off of some of the mechanics that they have. So for example, the shambling mound, it can grapple you and then engulf you, so if that happens, it's essentially one player kind of taken out of the equation. And then the mud methods, they also have an ability / innate ability when they die, that they kind of spray mud everywhere that's very sticky, and so it can restrain you if you fail a dexterity check. The dexterity check is not very high, and while the player is in the shambling mound, I probably should have edited it a little bit to kind of tailor it a little bit more towards the swamp, so that's kind of my bad. But nothing really happens. If you succeed your Constitution saving throw, which my players do a lot, they have really high constitutions, then nothing really happens to them, so they kind of just chill. And so I didn't really like this combat. Once you get rid of the mud methods, which they did because Morgal just threw a fireball, and I rolled really poorly for each of them, so they failed and were basically incinerated. So once the mud methods are gone, then it's just kind of the 5 or 6 of them hacking away at this shambling mound as it just basically tries to eat people, or if it's already eaten somebody, it just kind of slams into them with its vines. So it wasn't a super as interesting of an encounter as I had hoped. Not really any fault on anyone's part. It was more just, I think I didn't scale it well, and I think the shambling mound's kind of abilities or effects didn't play out the way I'd hoped they would. So now I notice that I can scale things a little bit more difficult, at a higher difficulty level, because my world is supposed to be deadly, and it did some damage, but I don't think any of them were really very concerned for getting knocked out or anything like that. But it was kind of also just a warm up, so I didn't necessarily want to start with something too difficult, but now things can ramp up a little bit. So getting into the session, we start off with combat. They deal with the methods in the shambling mound fairly easily. Rendry, who is their Fearbolt guide, they have a little bit of RP, some commentary about how he's never seen this kind of shambling mound before in the swamp. The mud methods are not common, but they are around, and they like to play pranks and try to trick travelers into luring them deeper into the swamp to get stuck, etc. And let's see. So they continue on towards this grove of Driscoll's Kiss, the mushrooms that they're looking for. And they kind of crest over a hill after walking for a little bit longer, and they find the grove. So this grove has been mostly cleared out of mushrooms. They reach it at nighttime, do some investigating, and find that the grove has been cleared out. Rendry mentions that no one in his tribe has really been here for like at least a week. They look for tracks and stuff like that, and there aren't really any around. With Valheri's like knowledge of botany and like the research that she's done on the mushrooms, you would know that they don't really grow back very quickly. I think I said it was 1d6 kind of days. So there are many like small mushrooms that are starting to sprout, but there aren't very many that are like a mature size. And so that's kind of concerning. It seems that like some entity, someone has been here like harvesting these mushrooms for a reason. So afterwards, it's late in the day, so they decide to kind of backtrack a ways and then take a long rest. So I think with this session, which was a shorter session, I did a better job of keeping the story and kind of the conversation moving. I don't really think there was a time when it was just like a pause where either I was waiting for them to give me something, or like they were unsure of what to do, or like were waiting for me to say something. So I think I did a better job of making it a little bit more immersive, especially at nighttime, because a lot of the time I feel like at night I'm just like, okay, your watch goes without a hitch, especially when they've just finished combat. I think they kind of expect it almost, so I need to be a bit better about that, but in the future. So anyways, they take watch. Valhyrie and Umric, because they're elves and have night vision and only need to sleep half the time, they take the first watch and don't really see anything. I maybe should have switched it around, because they rolled like a 20 at least on perception, and then in the second watch, Tyrell, our other elven fighter, he rolled like a 12, and I think I maybe should have switched it, but it's not unfeasible that he would have noticed this. So anyways, they take the first watch, everything's fine, and then Tyrell's turn, he takes the watch alone, and I tell him that he hears a noise, much like kind of like rustling against the underbrush, or like very quiet footsteps, sort of, that are to the west, I believe, the west, and that are getting louder, but they're not. This sound's not coming right at them. It's kind of like bypassing them and heading southward, feasibly towards the grove that they had just left. So he kind of waits a little bit to see if it indeed does pass by, and then he starts to follow it. So stealth check, survival check, etc., to see if he can successfully follow the trail of this person, or entity, or animal, creature, whatever it is. Which he does, though, successfully, with a decent stealth and, I think, perception roll. So he actually returns back to the grove, and what he sees a woman with, it's nighttime, so can't really make out colors, but a woman with kind of short hair wearing a cloak of feathers, who is kind of in the middle of grove. She kind of kneels down and is like inspecting a mushroom, and then after a while she vanishes. And based off of Tyrell's like perception / this woman's abilities, like Tyrell doesn't know whether they like turned invisible and left, if they teleported, if they are still there. He doesn't really know. He just knows that once he gets to that spot, she's gone. There's no real trace of her, and kind of the spot where she stood and was inspecting the mushroom, the spot around the mushroom has kind of like decayed or become corrupted, and like the vegetation has like rotted some, and the ground is like darker. And so he returns back to the party, wakes Umric and Valkyrie to tell them what they saw, what he saw. Valkyrie also tries to investigate the grove, but isn't able to really glean much more information. So they go back, finish their long rest, and wake up for the day. So, let me see. I'm actually pretty sure that's where we left off. It was a short session just because let me see. Yeah, it was a short session just because of how long combat took, and I think we started late, and I didn't want to push it like too long, but even so, this took us maybe 3 hours or so. Our sessions normally maybe go anywhere between 3 to 4, 4.5, depending. So short session, not a whole lot happened, but I think there's enough of like hints and like potential leads to make it interesting. Them seeing this like woman just kind of disappear in this mushroom grove that they've never seen before, don't really know, maybe have a hint of who that is just based off of an earlier description of like a woman who was arguing with Miskor, the half-elf who was poisoned. And then there's also hints about things like that I've given them, like lore, or the marsh keepers that I mentioned before, 3 elven women. That's a potential lead. So I don't have a whole lot to prep for next time, because I feel like I have the general idea of what's going to happen in this swamp, like for the next session or two, because ideally, I mean, they would go to next to the Kotobla Pass quest, the quest for clearing that grove of soul bells, the flowers that the Willow family needs for resurrection, and might need to prep maybe a few things that they can discover from there to kind of give them more leads so it doesn't become a standstill. I do have a little bit of possible RP or clues that they can find in Flornissa should they choose to go to the main city to find out possibly more about anything that's going on in the swamp, since that is a likely source of good information, since those people are kind of like the heart and soul of the swamp. So I've like prepped a little bit of like the characters and some of like the establishments that they could go to. It's always good to prep like the inn, the tavern, and like the leader of the city, something like that. And then the other thing that I'm like kind of working on is what the resurrection ritual is with the Willow tribe. Not saying that my players are necessarily going to die, but if it happens, what kind of the requirements / rules are going to be, and I think I have it figured out for the most part. Basically, it'll be kind of skill challenge-esque, where they kind of describe to me what they're doing to kind of help the family, if anything at all. They have to make sure that they have all of the ingredients and the components, and then once the ritual is performed, I roll a d20, and based off of the number I get, that sets the DC for the player's roll. So the player's roll is for whoever is being resurrected. Basically, my thought is that they'll have some kind of interaction with Melispa, the goddess of wild nature, who would be the one kind of lending her powers to bring them back, and basically give them kind of an RP setting, like they're in this meadow, and then all of a sudden, like, these like trees start to sprout, and like this, as they stand there, the meadow kind of changes and blossoms and blooms into this like vibrant sort of almost forest-esque, with flowers and like fireflies and like little floating lights, and it's very beautiful. And then they hear a voice, almost a whisper, a voice who asks them basically that's like, I see another wayward soul has found its way to me. Tell me, child, what it is that you have to offer. And then based off of their answer and kind of like what they say, then I tell them to roll a check, a d20 plus one of their 6 modifiers, depending on how they describe what it is that ties them to the mortal world, or what they still have to offer to, or what it is that why they want to be resurrected, basically. And then based off of the answer, I choose the appropriate attribute. They roll. If they succeed, they're resurrected. If they fail, then Melissa will probably see fit to guide them on into whatever afterlife they have. So I'm still kind of working out the DCs. I figure for the first one it should be pretty low. Even since there is a range, depending on what the roll is for like the Firbolg's ritual, I figure it can be anything of 3 numbers. Like my range initially is like 8 to 10, but we'll see. It might bump it a little bit lower, since if it depends on their certain attributes. Not all attributes are really that good, but I also don't want to tell them that like this is dependent on their skills, because then they'll just be like, okay, well, I'm going to use my highest skill no matter what. I want it to be more of an RP thing for them to kind of get more in touch with their character and kind of tell me what their character is about, because I feel like not many of them know that, and I want them to kind of find something to use as like a bargaining or like a to persuade Melissa. So hopefully then they can do a little bit of soul searching for their own characters. That's my plan for that, if they do use it. Otherwise, yeah, I'm pretty ready, I feel like, which is odd because I'm never ready as a DM, but yeah, I'm excited to see what happens with the soul bells and the Kotobla Pass, and how they're going to go about finding the source of this poison, because definitely have some pretty cool ideas for that. They might not see it coming at all, and they might fall into a trap or ambush, or they might figure it out and be clever and somehow kind of see through the layers of like deception and like that are there. So we'll see how they do, but thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content, and to follow my channel and to follow my campaign as it unfolds. Hope to see you guys in episode 13. Bye!